Programs are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of Rogers Cable or Rogers TV.
Hi, and welcome to Politically Speaking. I'm David Shearman. My guests today are Francesca Dobbyn of the United Way of Bruce Gray and Jill Umbach, who wears many hats, but let's call her representing the Poverty Task Force today, because that's the kind of thing that we're going to be talking about. Now, Francesca and Jill are no strangers to this show, and they've always got something interesting to say, and I am quite sure today will be no different. Francesca, Jill, welcome. Good to see you both again.
Lovely to be here.
Thanks, David.
Now, I'm going to kick this off by asking you a question, both of you. If you were to think of our community as a traffic light, and there are three colors on a traffic light, red, amber, and green, what would you use to describe the state of our community today?
My original answer was red, but then red's a stop. And I think it's like all green all the time, because it's go, 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 and there's no pause, there's no amber. So I'm changing my preliminary answer from red to green, but really intense lime, go, 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 green.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I would answer that much like a new learner driving standard. That lurch forward, lurch backwards. Oh my gosh, I've stalled the engine. What am I going to do with the traffic behind me and the lineups? But I need to go forward. So I think we've come to a red light in some issues, in the sense of there is challenges happening. We've got some green forward momentum, some green ideas. We certainly know right now it's springtime, so all the community gardens are positively starting up, and there's some new ones starting up that's quite exciting. And at the same time, we've got sort of that lurch forward, lurch backwards. We've got some great ideas, and maybe not enough funding to do them.
Yeah, I like your analogies, because perhaps it's not one color. Dare I use the phrase rainbow?
June's coming.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
June is coming, and I think that, but I think the idea that we're red in some places, amber in others, green in some. You know, Jill, I'm glad you mentioned the community gardens, because I saw an ad or an invitation to get out and participate in the building of a community garden here in Owen Sound at, I think it's the Ed Taylor Park, is that right?
Yep. It's the new Ed Taylor Park, and I will put a plug in for the team. We are looking for volunteers on May 17th, this upcoming Friday, to help us build a fence. One of the requirements by the city is you have a fenced-in garden. So we need a lot of volunteers to help. And then ongoing, we're going to need people to help us prep, seed, weed, and all throughout the summer. So yes, Amanda and Simona and the team there are looking for Owen Sound-based residents to come help out. So it's an exciting new garden happening here in Owen Sound.
But there are also community gardens in Meaford, are there not?
Yes, Meaford is already seeded and up and running, and they have some incredible partnerships. But we see community gardens all the way from Tobermory to Ripley. And I just saw a couple of new ones that have been revitalized in Markdale. They've got a call out for volunteers in Markdale to work with Southeast Grey Community Health Center and their gardens. CMHA has gardens throughout as well, Wyerton, Kincardine, and different places. So a lot of community gardens run by local municipalities where you can buy a plot, like in Hanover. And just recently I saw Hanover Heights School had 2 plots, and the kids put out new name tags, and it was a kindergarten class, and it's a kindergarten. So a little cuteness there, but 2 huge plots that these kids were going to seed up and watch them grow into the summertime. So I think we've got everything from kids learning how to grow to having accessible gardens in Walkerton and in Markdale, where seniors can access them at raised beds, and also they're wheelchair friendly.
Well, that's remarkable because a lot of those skills, I hate to say it, have kind of slipped and slid under the radar. I mean, who am I to talk? I don't. My wife does the gardening. I don't. But I remember my father was a great green thumb, and those skills have to be learned in a way.
They
They're
do.
they're not innate. They have to be learned.
And there's something to be said about the stewardship as well.
Mhm.
If you want to sort of pull in that truth and reconciliation connection once again, too, we learn a lot from the community gardens and work that's being done at both First Nations with regards to a stewardship with the land. It also teaches you that how do we keep the land healthy? How do we keep ourselves healthy? How do we move into the generations? As you said, it may have been passed down by your grandfather to your father or grandmother to daughter, but it's generational on how we take care of the land and how we feed ourselves.
And I think the other thing is that our municipalities are getting on board with community gardens, being very supportive. Is the garden behind St. George's Church here in Owen Sound going to be running this year? Is that?
Oh, definitely. Yes. So CMHA has both gardens for community members that can rent them, and then also for people experiencing mental health experiences, they can also access the program, and it does tie in to also processing the food. So a lot of the community gardens that we know of also work on processing. Processing, by the way, I mean that they are making jams and other things and hot peppers. And so really looking at how to use and maximize the food that comes out of the garden for the community. In the Meaford area and Thornbury, they have a large gleaning program that accesses some of the apple trees on farms that aren't in production. And therefore they can then be gleaned, and then half of it gets used and donated to the food bank, and the other half goes home with the individuals that do the gleaning. So there's quite a lot of outreach, a lot of education, a lot of links with food and learning. Especially if you look at down in Ripley at the Botanical Gardens, they're doing heritage seeds, and upcoming in the next week, they've got kids coming in and they're going to learn all about vegetables. So there's so much education going on.
That reminds me, you used a word there people may not be familiar with, gleaning. What's gleaning?
Mm-hmm. So gleaning is really just harvesting what's available, and we have very generous owners of land where, especially Thornbury, Meaford area, we know the apples. There's so many apple orchards, or people that used to have a large apple orchard on their farm that they're not harvesting anymore. And so gleaning means that you go along, you pick what's there. And so it's a great program that allows people to go out, learn about how to help a farmer pick. They also learn how to actually do the job. They have all the tools that will safely glean. And then it's really fantastic for, say, a retired couple on a farm who are no longer harvesting, and therefore it helps them out as well, helps them clean up around the trees, and everybody benefits.
Sure.
Yeah,
Sure.
so Goldsmiths, so for example, Goldsmiths just outside of Thornbury got a hold of us a couple of years ago around their tomato harvest. They were done with the plants, but they still had tomatoes out there. Was somebody interested? So we connected them immediately with Simona, and Simona took a team out. And generally when you're gleaning like that, the volunteers keep 50% of the food, and then the other half goes into a food program, be it a food bank or what have you. And Goldsmith was like, whoa, this was amazing. So now they've got Simona on speed dial. So as soon as they're finished with one particular harvest, they get a hold of Simona. She runs the Grey Bruce Garden Community Garden Network, funded by the United Way through the Sustainability Network. And she goes out and she's building this network of gleaning.
Mm-hmm.
In addition to that, as part of her job as well, she's also providing technical support across Grey Bruce for community gardens, whether they be setting up or if they need seeds. She also manages donations of seeds from various farmers. And in the summertime, when everything's starting to get harvested and into the fall, she will also take donations from a lot of private businesses, farmers who have extra surplus food that then can be donated to community meal programs and or food banks.
I've met Simona, and actually I've interviewed her for when I was doing a substitute host on HealthLink, and remarkable woman, and just got a real enthusiasm for these kinds of feeding programs that are community based. So a real asset to our community.
Yes, I've learned the word hugelkultur.
I beg
Whereas
your
the first
pardon?
time I heard it, I was like, bless you.
What is that, Francesca?
Hugelkultur is a way of composting, and it's layers that you start with branches and then other leaves and things like that, and you build layers, and it's a way of composting, and using vermiculture is worms, but it's one of the ways of composting.
Gee, you can increase your vocabulary doing this work too.
Yeah, you can, and there's going to be hugelkultur at the Taylor Park. So if you're curious about that, head on down on Friday and give them a hand.
Sure.
And part of that too is that, these community gardens are a large part in spend a lot of time demonstrating how you can do it too, right? So coming out and volunteering, you can also learn how to do it in your own home gardens.
Yeah, it sounds like it's really exciting stuff, and hey, it might even taste good too.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
For sure. Now, Francesca, one of the things that I know about United Way is you have 27 funded programs. I actually counted them up. It's quite remarkable. The United Way has got its fingers in a lot of pies across Grey Bruce. And the total amount you were able to spread around the community was $200,000, but it wasn't enough. And do you have a plan to encourage people to continue to donate? Do you look forward to getting it better, or is it still, are we still post-COVID?
We're still COVID in terms of the level of need in our community. We're actually more than COVID. We never went back to pre-COVID levels, and our levels now are higher than at the height of the pandemic. And certainly we're dealing without any level of government COVID funding. Whereas during, 2021 through to 22, we had provincial funding around COVID issues. We had federal funding around COVID issues. We had lots of community donations to deal with those needs. And that's all done with because, it's post-pandemic, except we have not returned. Like the economy is now the pandemic of the inflationary needs around heating and cooling your home, housing costs, food costs, all of those costs, those day-to-day operational costs have continued to climb so much for households. Talking to Alice today, they did 1,300 households in April of 2024, whereas pre-pandemic they'd be between 600 and 700, so almost double.
That's Alice One at the Salvation Army
at
Food
the
Bank.
Salvation Army.
So that's per month. So essentially, it's doubled.
It's essentially doubled.
Mm-hmm.
And, nothing's gone backwards. The SOS market, where we're doing outreach to people who are precariously housed and homeless. They're doing O'Share's doing 250 lunches there. They're doing 100 lunches out into the schools every day because the kids don't have lunch at school. So what we're seeing, and so the United Way operates kind of on three levels. We fund programs and projects in the community to do some of the work to address the needs and the concerns we see in the community. We do some of the work directly ourselves. So we have the utility assistance program, the backpack program, financial literacy. So we run some Bruce Gray level programs, as well as we work with, Jill with the Poverty Task Force around the policy changes. So, you take utilities, for example, we went fundraising like crazy to help people pay the bills. And then we said, okay, we can't sustain this. What's the policy change? Winter disconnection ban was part of that. We got the OESP in place, working provincially around those issues. So, we're trying to do things on many fronts. And we are 100% fundraised from the community. We are not a transfer payment agency. Absolutely. Do we chase grants? We absolutely chase grants to do the work that we do. But every day we have to figure out hey, how are we going to keep the doors open, and how are we going to meet this need in the community? And when the economy is challenged like this, our amazing donors, though, sometimes have to go from being $50 a month to $25 a month because they too are impacted by this. And this is across Canada. This is not unique to us. It is not unique to the United Way. It is not unique to Bruce Gray. Canada Helps just put out a bit of an alarming report on this state of, charitable giving has stagnated. And that's a challenge because we're asking, and governments are asking charities to do more, but we don't have the resources to do more. But there's still an expectation. Oh, if you're hungry, just go to the food bank. There are community programs for that. And it's a download of, I'd say, Jill might say it too, it's a download of responsibility to the charitable sector. It's an offloading of basic human needs. And whether somebody eats today or has heat today shouldn't depend on whether or not I'm a good fundraiser.
Good point. Good point. It's a very large circle that is hard. Which is broken. When we talk about things not going well, they're not. And I think that's a reasonable comment. I'm not sure they're broken, but things are not good. Things are not well.
No, things are not well. And I don't want to, the system's not broken. The food security system that supports people that are hungry is not broken. It's overwhelmed. It's doing what it's set up to do, except instead of, a small cohort of people who cannot meet their food needs for whatever reasons, it's now the default to, I can't afford to pay the rent, so go to the food bank.
Yeah.
And I would add, sorry, David, I would just add with that, I do think the food system as a whole is not comprehensive enough. I think that what we consider emergency food, where we are feeding people because they are hungry and they can't afford to purchase food, is our emergency response. What we don't have is in the other half, when we talk about food security and feeding everybody, we don't have people with enough income to be able to purchase their food or to be able to afford, to be able to make a decision between rent and food and still keep going and have healthy families. And so I do think there's something wrong with the system that doesn't allow someone to make enough money, either through social assistance if they need it because of other unstable issues, or if through wages, to be able to purchase food. And so I think what Francesca said, the economy, the rising costs, we definitely have a housing crisis where large amounts of money are going towards housing and less money is going towards food. So we definitely have a food insecurity issue that I don't think can be solved just by feeding people. We have an affordability of food. And I know that we've seen a lot of that in the media lately, but we definitely need to understand the difference between meeting people's hunger needs and creating food security for people in Canada.
I'm old enough, neither of you are, to remember the first food banks we had in Canada. The first one in Eastern Canada opened across from where I was working too many years ago to count. And I often wonder, okay, when will this end? Well, it won't, or it isn't. Maybe that's a better way of framing it. It isn't. But there's something skewed when we continue to have, as you said, Francesca, doubling of food bank clients. There's something not quite right here.
And a lot of the food bank clients are working.
Yeah.
We used to have that social contract that if you had a job, you could have maybe not own a house, but you could definitely rent a house. You would have a car. Your basic needs would be met if being careful. But if you worked, you could live a life. And there are people who have full-time jobs, but it's just not enough money to pay for the basics.
Or 2 or 3 jobs.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I hear parents speaking of their adult children and saying, I really worry about them because sometimes they have to make that choice between paying the rent and and getting meals from O'Share. And they'd like to not to do that, but they do. It's not as if they're not working, not as if they're not working hard. So where do you see this? Is there an end to this game, to this? Is there an end game at all, Francesca, do you think?
I don't know. We've written report after report after report. We've submitted to any government consultation that'll listen to us or not listen to us. Report after report. Universal basic income is a proven solution, but it just doesn't sit well with people. They think it's all about, oh, I'm just going to go home, play video games, except every report says the opposite. But we still can't wrap our heads around it. We also have a lot of stigma and shame that if you just budgeted your $737 a month better, you could pay $1,500 in rent. And there's a whole, I want to say there's a distrust. Sometimes I get a sense that what we say is actually true is not, well, no, that can't be right. So when we go and we talk to our political leaders and we say, this is the situation, and they're like, no, that doesn't make any sense. No, it doesn't make any sense. But it's true. And it just, does not compute, but they don't know what to do about it. And they don't know what those solutions are. And as much as we, the solutions that are there that have legit studies behind them, well, no, there has to be a different answer. We want a different answer. And we certainly, when we look at what causes poverty, it's so much easier to focus on actions of the individual rather than looking at, systemic issues and community issues. And, I was sharing with Jill this morning that the GTR has closed the stop at Walmart now. So there's only one GTR stop in Owen Sound, and it's downtown at the transit terminal. Well, I know a lot of people who were PSWs that were using the GTR and would get off at Walmart to go work at the gardens. So what's that impact going to be on those employees who now have to get off the GTR downtown, hop on an Owen Sound transit bus to get back up the hill to get to that workplace? And what's the ripple effect of that? And it's because we don't have the funding for the transportation. So we have to make those decisions, and that's a county level decision. But then it impacts then quality of life, jobs, because now they have to leave an hour earlier to get to work, and whether the GTR schedule meshes with the Owen Sound transit schedule, and that ripple effect of one small decision like that can be really, really impactful. And, it's not about low-income people who can only take transit because they don't have a car. It can be about people with different abilities who just legally cannot drive, perhaps, or people that are new to Canada, but they're working, and so they don't have a driver's license yet. Like, there's all the reasons that people use transit, but we only see transit through a lens of cost to the municipality.
Or cost to the province, because in a previous show, Rick Byers was lauding, and rightfully so, that the gas tax money went to transit, in Sound and other municipalities. But to hear our warden talk, there's just not enough money for transit, while it is a provincial responsibility, it doesn't seem to be getting the attention or the funding that it appears to need.
And it's interesting, somebody made a comment that we don't question where the cars are going when they're going on a road, and we pay to pave that road, and we pay to engineer that road, and we plow that road. But when we have somebody on a transit system, we want to know why. We want to add a value judgment of, are they just going to play, or is it employment related transit, because that's the only viable and legit piece of transit. There's a judgment level and stigma attached to using transit, whereas transit's green, it's environmental, it's mass transit, it's great for moving people around, it's inclusive. Because if you reduce your transit, and you might move somebody who can use a basic transit system onto special disabled transit because they need door to door. And you cannot legally reduce the transit for people with different abilities. But that's a higher cost. Whereas if they were on the regular transit, because maybe they're visually impaired and they can just ride the transit once they learn the system. But if you reduce it down too much, then they need the accessibility van, and that's a higher cost. And it's, you're cutting off your nose to spite your face.
Mm-hmm. It is certainly a complex issue. And then we get into things like, well, if we discount fares for people on OW and ODSP, that leads us down a whole other ballpark, or whole other rabbit trail.
But we discount it for seniors. What's the difference?
Well, I know, precisely.
Yeah.
That's the point.
And I think fundamentally, you have to know that there isn't a transit system that exists. I think maybe one in Quebec that is actually sustainable in the sense of making a profit. Public transportation does not make a profit. It's a service for people to access work, access school, access services. And so it's greater than just, as Francesca indicated, people that are only looking at it for those going to work. There's so many other things people need access to, including healthcare and school. So it's more than just that. I know in other municipalities, they work really closely with their school boards to be able to get people on buses, school buses, to access work. Whereas, in our community, we keep very separate. And yet, in urban centers, everybody goes onto the same public transportation, whether they be going to school, work, or accessing healthcare, and then social inclusion. Social inclusion is a real critical factor. And I think we saw that during COVID. Once you cut us off, people really did suffer from the isolation. So social inclusion is also another aspect to public transportation.
Very true. Very true. It's not an easy, you sort of go all around these issues, in and out and roundabout, and it's a challenge for sure. It's a challenge for sure. But perhaps the key is not to give up hope.
Oh, you can't give up hope. Yeah, absolutely. There's always a glimmer of hope to everything.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I wanted to ask you too. This is, when we're taping this is mid-May. And Francesca, you've got a big program coming up in the summer and fall. And are you looking for someone to run your backpack program already?
Yes, we're doing interviews soon for a backpack student. We've already loaded in 8 to 12 skids of supplies. There's another 6 sitting at Staples, and a pile more out there in the supply chain somewhere headed our way. It's a huge undertaking. We did a record-breaking 2,400 backpacks last year, which is 5% more from the year before and 17% more than pre-pandemic levels. So it's, yet our costs have gone up 30%. My 99-cent binder, I just about cried when they told me it was $6.50 this year.
Ouch.
And I need 2,500 of them. So that, just the binders were $2,500 over what I had budgeted, because I had budgeted $4 a binder. So it hurts big time. It's our most popular program. It's the program everybody is very aware that the United Way runs. We have great support in the community. It's supported by direct donations as well as general United Way funds. But it's a $90,000 program now.
When it started, how many school bags did you put out?
I think the first year in 2005, we did 215. And then there was a big jump in 2012 when the province changed how they were doing the provincial tax credits around children. There used to be a back to school in August payment, and then there was a November snowsuit payment. And then they went, oh, you guys want more money? Okay, we'll split it out over 12 months. And we were like, well, that's not more money. That's just spread out money. And we went we climbed 500 that year because I know we went from like 1,200 to 1,700. And pre-pandemic, we were hovering around the 2,000. That was pretty much where we were at. And then, the pandemic got confused because were we in school, not school, in school, not school? And then if we're after, it's been climbing 2,300 the year before, 24 last year. And it's a great resource around, we put 211 magnets in it. We put Healthy Smiles, information. We use it as a vector. We have agencies because we do work with Children's Aid. We work with community livings. We work with food banks. It's an opportunity for them to connect with their families as well.
It's interesting. You went from 250 to 2,500. That's a full order of magnitude.
That's
that. Yeah, it is. It is.
And from a 1 day, let's pack all these in a day, to 2 months.
Yeah. Well, we're going to take a quick break and come back because we got more to talk about. Of course we do. I'm David Shearman. This is Politically Speaking. We'll be right back.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
This is Rogers TV.
Hi, welcome back to Politically Speaking. I'm David Shearman. My guests today are Jill Umbach of the Poverty Task Force and Francesca Dobbyn of the United Way of Bruce Gray. No strangers to our program and always welcome for the very unique and interesting perspective they both provide. So welcome back.
Thank you.
Now, let's shift it up a little bit. I asked you before we went to air, Francesca, what keeps you up at night? And you did say that, okay, I generally sleep pretty well, but you did allude to the fact that the situation with respect to people who are unhoused, and particularly the overdose situation, is something that is of deep concern in our community.
It's one of those things where, we had a thunderstorm come through the other night at 3 a.m. And, it just wakes you up as thunderstorms do. And you just start to worry about your people, and their names, and they're out there, and that they're awake, but they're not snuggled under blankets, safe. And you just stay awake a little longer worrying about them. And, the team does go out and check on everybody as much as we can. But we had a meeting about tents today. And, I think about 10 years ago, I was adamant I would never buy a tent because that meant we'd failed. And I just ordered a dozen today. And that weighs on me because I know I didn't fail. I know this system, everybody that works and is paddling like fury. And, when people talk about you juggle, for me, it's a room of spinning plates, and you're just running from plate to plate to keep it all up in the air, all spinning all the time. That's my That's my image. And, every time you try and solve a problem, there are things at play that you are like, I had no idea that was connected to this. I think about one of our unhoused people that was in a building, in a home, and had his own little wee apartment. And then there was a bit of a fire, and the city went, nope, you're not zoned to have an apartment in this. And so you can't come back. And he's been on the street ever since because there's nothing he can afford. And, there's cats that were living with him and they're still at the house. And he goes every day and makes sure the cats are fed, and it just, it gets you right here because there's no solve for that. There are people in our community on the streets for whom the housing needs don't fit the housing availability, be it cost, be it the supportive, be it, particular disorders or things like that. It's very, very complicated, and it doesn't help when the community just points and says, you're a horrible person. It doesn't help anybody. It doesn't help them. It doesn't help our system because they just get full of shame and stigma, and we can't get resources to them because they're afraid to pop their head up. Very concerned about the fire with the grandstand at the agricultural building. And I was really heartened by the police chief who came out and said, yeah, it was probably squatters, but it was not intentional. And it was people trying to stay warm. And this is what happens. This is not the first tent survival fire that's damaged property. It will not be the last if we don't start talking about it and doing something concrete and thoughtful about it.
Very true. I'll put a plug in for the Rogers TV show that was done actually last summer called We All Belong. And if people want to find out more and to hear some of the stories of people who are unhoused and people who you probably see on the streets, including some who have since passed away, that's probably a good place to start. And it's available on the Rogers TV website. So I'll plug another show, but I would encourage people to that's a good place to start if you want to see the issues. It's quite comprehensive because we have people from Safe and Sound, we had people from the SOS program, and police chief all interviewed for it as well. So,
David, I would add to that as well with that group. We know that the winter warming station that was open through the night for many of the people that are street involved has gone back to its summer hours. So it's not open overnight. So when Francesca and many of us worry at night, it's because there isn't a place for a lot of people to go that can accommodate complex needs. And kudos to Grey County for, purchasing the Diamond Motel and 713 being open and available and being able to provide some wraparound support services, as well as 14th Street. There's a lot of talk. It's really shifted in the last 10 years around the need for transitional housing, around the need for supportive housing, which is more than just putting people in a room. It's actually working with them to stay housed. And so it's pretty extreme cases that Francesca is referring to, those who don't fit into the system as we present it to them. And challenges exist with either mental health, addictions, or just lifestyle. I know that we've had issues in the past with many seniors and who prefer to be in the woods, prefer to be more isolated, prefer to be in a tent as compared to perhaps in a more controlled housing situation. So it's challenging all around, and some incredible work is being done. I think the access to healthcare and to survive living on the streets is something that the SOS Mobile Outreach is doing an incredible job with. Lives are being saved because people can be accessing services at the SOS markets in Hanover and Owen Sound. It's an incredible work that's being done. So that's where your green lights are. Some really positive. The fact that they've gone mobile and out to the community across Grey County is fantastic. And going to where people are at and understanding where people are at in their lives. So that's one of your green lights for today.
Oh, I fully agree. The SOS program is a remarkable success, and I've got personal experience with that. It does good work, and it is one of those we've profiled it here on this show with Kevin McNabb, but I've also interviewed, and I know some of the staff who work there. They do great work, and they do it across Grey Bruce or across Grey County because it's not into Bruce County yet, but. Is that going to come someday, Francesca? Is Bruce going to
Bruce is working on a different version, a Bruce version of SOS. There was a Mediva announcement around some funding, so we're just still waiting for that piece. And I want to, congratulate that team as well as, Grey County, Bruce County. Staff have gone to, Grey County housing staff recently went to a Built for Zero conference out west. And we all kind of went, okay, what'd you learn? What's all the secrets? What are the things we can do next? And they said, we're years ahead of everybody. They all turned to us and went, how the heck did you pull that off? How are you getting, the fact that SOS is 4 separate organizations? How do you have your hospital coming out to stuff? How did you get the public health on, how? And we're all going, no, we came to learn from you. You're supposed to tell us that we're missing things, not that we're ahead and innovative and super connected as agencies where you can pick up that phone and phone, Jill, do you know who I could talk to at the school board about this niche issue, who can move that forward? I was at a home show recently. The exhibitor next to me was a for-profit business. Their daughter came over to talk about backpacks. They're on the ethics committee, and I'm like, oh, I can ship you some backpacks to your high school by O'Share's taking it to Southeast Grey. Southeast Grey is going to drop it at the Grey Highlands High School. But then I'm like, okay, I don't know if I remembered her name right. So I get a hold of Jamie, and you just make the connections. And then I've got the principal who's now expecting, these backpacks to show up for this student to give out to some kids that she's identified. And that's the level of connectivity we have as a community of connecting. And, Jill's an amazing resource around who do I talk to about this? And that's what we get a lot from outside of our region, from Ontario, is holy boy, you guys are really super connected with each other, which is great. But then we're trying to solve problems.
I think part of that is the history. That the organizations have historically, not always, as you and I both we all know, but have historically had a level of cooperation that has relatively been pretty good. But the last 10 years have made a huge difference with the Poverty Roundtable.
Yeah. I think to add to that too is, we do like each other, but there's also a necessity. We can't do it alone. I think we don't have enough funding for any one organization to meet all the needs for any one community. So I think it comes out of necessity. I like to think that it comes from our values at the United Way and perhaps the values of my grandparents that, you work together with your neighbors. And while we don't have neighborhoods the same way urban centers do, we certainly do recognize neighbors across many, many miles need to work together and come together. So out of necessity, I think I come from having worked in some other places where, you had a lot of money. You didn't have to play in the sandbox with anybody else. But here we do. And therefore, we work very well together. I've had calls from other areas. The Poverty Task Force is part of a Mid-Ontario rural poverty reduction table. And they all keep asking me, so, where did you get permission to do that? And in Grey Bruce, we don't ask for permission. If there's a need and we got somebody down the chain that can respond, we do it. And we reach out to who can respond, right? We know who we are. We know where our partners are. And I think that's part of the strength of the United Way as well, is that we do have some feet on the ground, but we also have some funding. I'll bet not enough to meet all of the needs, but certainly gives us the flexibility to say, there's some good partners out there doing work that we can support.
Sure. Well, let's turn to one of those examples of working together. And that's something I know, Francesca, that's close to your heart, and that's Coldest Night of the Year, because that's really taken off in the last couple of years. And it was really expanded.
Yeah, it was expanded. So there were six coldest nights in 2024. Safe and Sound, who's been doing it for 5 years now, I believe. Graeber's Mentorship out of Hanover did one for the very first time. We did our second ones in Kincardine and Saugeen Shores, and then launched Meaford and Grey Highlands this year as well. So raising over $100,000 between our four locations, all focused on the themes around coldest night of the year are hungry, hurt, and homeless. So the funds that are coming back into those communities, and they will go out next week because we work with our partners. So when we are in a community, we work with a local community committee. So Southeast Grey Community Health Center is our partner for Markdale. So we share the proceeds, the net proceeds 50-50 with them. The Good Food Box in Kincardine, which is where we started developing that share concept of working with a local committee because the co-chairs of the Kincardine Good Food Box said to me, we need more funds for the token program to have more free boxes. And I'm like, well, I'm working on this event. If you help me, I'll split the proceeds with you. So, they're getting $7,000 to put straight into more good food boxes for Kincardine. And Kincardine has created the Good Food Box now, just a little commercial for them, where they have 2 satellites. So they work with the Lions Clubs of Kincardine, who then liaison with Ripley, and they go to Ripley with Good Food Boxes, and now Tiverton. So Kincardine has satellites. So that's where we took that coldest night of the year concept of working locally as well as regionally to support those issues. And it's that Saturday, that last Saturday of February, and people are really getting behind that, and it's really important to address those issues. And it's nice to have a really strong fundraiser at the beginning of the year. As charities, we can spend a lot of the year starving for donations until Christmas, and a lot of year-end, a lot of people making a year-end intentional donation around their tax filings for the year, which is totally fine. But I did a real deep dive on the last 2 years, and over 55% of our funds were coming in the last 3 months of the year. And that's a really hard to address need and manage the organization when you're going into that last quarter going, I don't know if we're going to make it. We're going to end up with this huge deficit, and then 50% of your funds come in then. So having this nice big event in February and the funds showing up in May just takes a little tiny bit of pressure off and evens out the year from a management side of things, because we have the confidence to go forward and have the support of the community.
Yeah, you make some very good points there, Francesca, that coldest night of the year it's an odd time, but it's a natural time. It's a very natural time for that particular topic. The other thing I really like is that there is a developing sense of community. When you look at all the teams, I heard on the Monday morning, people saying, yeah, I was out on Saturday at coldest night of the year. It was cold, or it wasn't. It was this year. It was quite mild, but it was cold enough, but it could be colder.
Well, it's an opportunity for our partners. I don't know of a region that didn't have their local police service involved and fundraising and, being part of the solution as opposed to always, having to be the big stick part of, we're going to call the police about this. They're part of it, and they get to see us in action and our connectivity to it as well. And all as well as the corporations and, people who want to talk about the issues and, that connectedness. For Meaford, the Meaford Rotary Club, who've just created their thrift store, they bought the building that houses the food bank. So they were kind of starting to dip their toe into that social services world. And I had early conversations with them around the thrift store of, well, what is it you're doing here? Is this fundraising for the Rotary Club, or are you hoping to provide low-cost clothing to the community? And they're like, we're really fundraising. Then don't ever apologize for doing that. And this is how we work with missions, and this is how we work with the Salvation Army, and this is how we work with a close hamper in Kincardine around people who do need access to low income. And, we use coupons, and we use the letters, and we verify, and we can be your partners for this. But don't ever apologize for trying to do something.
Yeah. And because, as you said, the government has downloaded a lot of services onto the charitable sector, onto the nonprofit sector, and it's going to depend on us. It really is going to depend on all of us.
And it's really important for your listeners to understand that we have people that are donors, and then, life pulls the rug out from underneath them, and they become clients of our systems. And then, they get back up. It could be a medical diagnosis. Cancer will really knock you for a loop. Often it's a couple of years, and then, hopefully everything goes well, and then you're back to work, and then you become a donor again. And we've seen that so frequently.
Oh, yeah.
I had a grandma who pulled up one day at Stuff the Bus at Staples and said, okay, I raised my grandchildren. The last one graduated 2 months ago. I'm done raising my kids. It's time for me to give back. And I mean, we were all in, pieces with this grandma. And, the grandkids are rolling their eyes. There goes grandma. But we're all like, oh, it's so lovely. I'm so glad. Thank you for telling all that. Because it was a beautiful story, and it was a beautiful piece of gratitude.
I have heard the same kind of stories from women who have been through the shelter system.
Yeah.
And who are back on their feet and have said, I want to support the system that helped me in a really difficult time. And they're able to do that. I mean, not everyone can, but those who do, those who can do. Same is true of places like O'Share, places, no matter what. It does work. It does work.
I've had a couple of parents who've come in and made a donation and said they didn't make it. The opiates killed them, but you guys tried your best. And standing with a parent who's lost their child to the opiate overdose crisis, and they're making a donation, is gut-wrenching. It's gratifying, and it's grateful, and it's hope. And they know everybody tried, but at the same time, you're just like, how are you breathing? How are you standing here in front of me after such a loss? And, that's what keeps you going. And they're the ones who show up to the memorials and go, you guys keep going, because I know you're trying.
Yeah. Yeah. I know those stories as well. People who come to the memorials, who will walk in. I've seen people walk into to SOS who just have kids, and they've said, I need this and this. No problem.
Yeah,
the SOS is there not just for people who have problems, but people who help those who have problems, or who are parenting those who have problems. So it's all of that. And we should also mention sometimes there are success stories. I heard from a friend who said recently they met someone 2-3 years ago who were on the street. They were homeless. Things were pretty rough for them, and they helped them out a little bit. But they said, I've always wondered what happened to that person. Just, well, of course, Owen Sound isn't that big. There's always somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody, and this person actually bumped into that person they'd helped 2 or 3 years prior, and they're on their feet.
Yeah.
They're living on their own. They're living. They're housed. They're careful, but they're housed, and they're okay. And that's all we can ask, really, isn't it? That we be okay. We help each other be okay.
Yeah. And I think, David, with more awareness of helping people live where they are and get services where they live is really incredible. And so the SOS contributes to that. Some of the hospital services are reaching out and being now offered as well on Tuesdays at O'Share, where we have people that have addiction issues are increasingly. So we're adding more programs to meet people where they're at in the community rather than sending them away. We know that we've been waiting, and this spring at some point in time, we'll have the opening of our new wellness center, and people will be able to get inpatient care. Previously, women would have had to travel outside of the area to get that mental health and addiction treatment in our community. So I think more and more people are realizing that real solutions are possible and real supports can be there for people. It does take provincial funding it does take some local contributions. We've got to pay for people to get those support services, but some of the green lights are happening in our community, recognizing supportive housing is needed, transitional housing is needed, on top of all the other affordable housing that's needed for people who have incomes that, just aren't stretching far enough, or for those families that want to come back to the area, or your kids that want to come back to the area and find some place to start and build a foundation. What I also want to tag team in on is some incredible volunteers across Grey Bruce that are making sure you file your taxes, because one of the big system changes as well is we saw through the pandemic, the CERB and the benefits and the top-ups that came through our tax system. And so something that we at the Poverty Task Force have been working hard to support and promote is the recruitment of volunteers, and then the provision of service across Grey Bruce to file your taxes. And we work with MP Alex Ruff's office and a large number of community-based volunteer income tax programs. So tax season, is coming to an end, but people with low income can still file throughout the year. We still have a bit of a challenge to meet the demand this year. So there's a lot that needs to happen there.
You're looking for volunteers still?
Well, no, unfortunately, we're kind of past the season for recruitment of volunteers. We need to start thinking about recruiting by September to be able to file into next year. People have to get registered, have to get trained, and we need to have them in place for clinics. But just this year, the demand was overwhelming. And we did take on a huge number of new volunteers thanks to a recruitment campaign that the Bruce County Libraries did. We did a little bit, but overall, all of the organizations were looking for new volunteers, and then it takes a while for them to come on board. It took up to 3 months sometimes to get people on board. So we're a little bit late to the game in our recruitment. If people are interested, they can still call 211 and learn about it, but we're not taking registration until September. If people just want to go to the CRA site around the Community Volunteer Income Tax Program and sign up themselves, they will be linked to a local organization, a coordinator. But people are struggling to file taxes, and we know that tax credits that come to low-income households do make a difference. We know that one of the critical tax credits, which is the child tax benefit or credit, it's about the only thing we've seen that's made a dent in child poverty rates. Certainly CERB did during the pandemic. It tracked where, poverty rates were reduced, but post-pandemic, they're back down again.
Yeah. It's quite something, and I would say to anyone who's interested in the program, keep it in mind. I know that it's very worthwhile, and you can make a real difference in your community and in people's lives just by filling out tax forms, if that's your bent. It's not everybody's cup of tea, but hey, it's a really good opportunity for volunteers. Well, guess what? We've almost run out of time. Francesca, I want to thank you for the conversation. Jill, you as well. It's always good to hear the both of you talk about our community and some of the good things that are happening, because it's too easy to get caught up in the negative narrative. So thank you both. And may the green lights be yours. And thank you, friends, for being a part of Politically Speaking. I'm David Shearman. Yes, we'll talk again.
Connect with us by visiting our website or email us at comments@rogerstv.com.
Are you the type who would keep going or stop? It's not easy to stop when you have an addiction. Legalizing cannabis won't stop addiction. It trivializes its consumption. Let's be vigilant. If you need help, visit portage.ca.
It's been a long time coming.
You don't win it to keep it, you win it to be a part of its history.
Always knew.
Always hard to see the difference between winning and losing.
How to steal.